Hello, my name is Jessica Adams. Today is August 21st, 2024, and we are interviewing Marvin Feldman for the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan Association 90th anniversary. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Wonderful. Please tell us a bit about yourself. Are you a native Dallasite?
I am a native Dallasite. I was born here in Dallas and June 30th, 1945 at Baylor Hospital. And, excuse me, not Baylor, St. Paul. My daughter was born in Baylor. Okay. Yes, so I'm definitely a native.
Fabulous. When did your parents come to Dallas?
My parents came actually in 1929. My mother used to call that the ungodly days because they came during the Depression, obviously. Both parents were from Poland. My father was from Warsaw. My mom was from a little farming shtetl in Poland called Daranówka. And so my grandfather came earlier in 1922, of course landed at Ellis Island, New York, and worked in the garment district because he didn't know the language, obviously, and as he used to relay to me, he just sat there at a machine putting cloth through all day, had a boarding house there back in those days in 22, saved his money for 7 years to be able to get enough passage to be able to bring my mom and, of course, his wife, my grandmother, to America. So it's truly the American dream. And then from New York, they came to Dallas as he had already had a brother who had come over a little earlier. And so that's how we landed in Dallas.
What is, or describe your connection to the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan?
My grandfather, Wolf Reisberg, was one of the 12 original founders of the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan in 1935 is when they formed. He, which was kind of unique because what happened back then, and he used to tell me stories when I was much older in high school about the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan. And anyway, at that time, I'm 16, 17 years old, I thought they were great stories. I listened to that. And my father, of course, was active in the Hebrew Free Loan. He was a president. And my mom, which was kind of unique because back then the organization, the way my mother told me, obviously they didn't have women in the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan. I guess women had the right to vote, but they didn't have women in the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan as board members or members. So we always got a laugh about it because she called herself the very first secretary of the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan in 1935 because she had graduated high school. A lot of these men did not have formal educations of any kind from the old country. So they counted on her to send out the dues and to do all their record and bookkeeping for them. So as a passing note, she told me that back in 1935 the dues were 25 cents. So fast forward, it's a lot different today, obviously. Okay.
How and when did you first learn about Dallas Hebrew Free Loan?
I can remember as a child growing up in the 50s, my grandfather had a grocery store where the Hebrew Free Loan was originated. And so even at the tender age of, I couldn't remember exactly, 8 or 9 years old, would have been 1953 or 1954 in that area, I can remember the grocery store was obviously in South Dallas. There was no North Dallas. Most of the area in North Dallas at that time was owned by the Caruth family. It's all, ranching, farms, that type of thing. everyone lived basically Jewish in South Dallas. Okay, so there were no formal grocery stores as we know today. No Tom Thumbs, no Kroger's. Most of the groceries were independent, like my grandfather. Riceburg was his name, last name, Riceburg Groceries. I think A&P started to come in back in the late 50s and of course bought him out and that type of thing. But anyway, make a long story short, that's when I first became aware because as a child, I would go to the picture show and then come down to my grandfather's grocery store, which was on the same street, Forest Avenue, which is now called Martin Luther King Drive. And so I'd go in there, of course, and get myself a cold drink, a piece of candy, and I can remember seeing men back behind the butcher case where they had a metal table and chairs, and of course I didn't know what those guys were doing. Obviously at 8 years old, 9 years old, they introduced me, that type of thing. But I'm assuming that they were having a meeting of the Hebrew Philon. So really, that's probably the first time I really became aware of the Hebrew Philon. Until, like I said, much later, when my father and my grandfather, I loved his stories when he would tell me things that would happen back then. So that's when I first became aware of Dallas Hebrew Philon.
Did your grandfather tell you about his involvement in the process of starting the Hebrew Free Loan?
Yes. I thought that was pretty unique because what had happened, the way my grandfather relayed the story to me, was that there was a Jewish man who had taken the train and he had stopped off in Dallas. It was before Shabbos, sundown, on a Friday, and the Dallas police, seeing this man loitering around the train station, thought that's exactly what he was doing. He was loitering. So they arrested him because A, he couldn't speak the English language well. They couldn't understand him. My grandfather said possibly they thought he was drunk because, he's garbled. What's this man saying? So the word spread pretty quickly to some of the other original founders. They all came over to my grandfather's grocery store and said, what are we going to do? We got to get our fellow Jew out of jail, got to make bail, whatever. So these men anteed up and bailed this man out before Shabbos. And so these 12 men then decided, hey, this was great. We were able to help our fellow landsmen. Why couldn't we start an organization to help other Jewish people here in the Metroplex that would be in need? So they formed the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan and put in a little seed money, to get started to help other immigrants like themselves to a better life. So that's really how I became, or how it came about, according to my grandfather, Wolf Riceburg. Okay.
Awesome. What do you recall thinking or feeling upon learning the role your ancestor had in establishing the organization?
I was extremely proud of my grandfather, if I don't well up in tears after all these years. I was always amazed that he was such a visionary, knowing to get out of Poland before obviously Hitler came to power. What possessed a man to leave his home, his family, as a young man. So to come to a strange foreign land, work 7 years to get up enough money to bring his wife and my mother and her 4 sisters over. So right then and there, that told me that, my grandfather was just special. So, and then I guess most of all, he lived and he practiced Gemilas Hasadim, loving acts of kindness. That's all this man, if I could point to one perfect individual, if there was such a thing as a perfect, it would be my grandfather.
How are you, or how have you and your family been involved with Dallas Hebrew Free Loan since its inception?
We will get to, I've been in the organization, I was trying to count back about 20 years. But I think what's unique is how I became really involved with Hebrew Free Loan, or as I say, hands-on. But in 1993, or about a little before 94, the organization met here at the Jewish Community Center, and because these men didn't seek out or to get the younger generation to come behind them, they were literally dying off. I mean, there were a handful of elderly gentlemen, and I often teased about it that I think they met on a Sunday just because they wanted to have a bagel and a schmear and a cup of coffee, you know, and tell stories. Because they, like I said, they were not really conducting any business, okay, because, like I said, they were just old and dying off. My mother had a cousin, Fred Reisberg. Fred is basically a legend in the Dallas Jewish community. I mean, he's unbelievable. He too was a tremendous visionary. But prior to me coming, the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan basically, as I was saying, was going out of business. They had established the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan Philanthropic Fund. They gave all their monetary assets, everything, to the Dallas Jewish Federation. So they were going out of business. Fred refused to let the organization die. So what he did, he called my mother, who was a cousin. Also, Fred had come from Poland. His father was my grandfather's brother. So he called my mom and said, look, why can't we get your son involved in the Hebrew Free Loan? I was 40 in that area at the time. In turn, he was very, very smart. He had 3 daughters, 2 of which lived here in Dallas, also of my peer group, maybe a little bit younger. And he got them. Then, not stopping there, there was also a past president, Yale Candy. And so he, his daughter, obviously Susan Jerry Candy, but he contacted Susan, who was married to Alan Luderman, also a past president of this organization, and my vice president back in '94. And so he had a nucleus. Quite honestly, we all met, as they called us, the youngsters. We were in our 40s, but we were the youngsters. But we youngsters came up here, saw how they had conducted a board meeting. If they weren't arguing or bickering or whatever, and nothing getting done, we weren't sure we wanted to become a part, in all honesty. So we talked amongst ourselves, 4 of us, you know, do we want to come back again or not, you know? Fred wouldn't give up. He again called each of us and said, come to another meeting, you'll like it. Okay. So we came to our second meeting. He was pretty smart, and like I said, he was a visionary. So he knew that he got us involved with Hebrew Free Loan, that we would bring in our friends and our peer group, which is what we did. Hence, the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan from those days obviously has grown and has flourished. Since that time, obviously, we all have served on the board or as past officers. I currently have a niece and a nephew that are both active here at the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan on the board. And Eric Feldman and Elizabeth Chappell, or Liz. So the tradition carries on. And so that's how I became involved with the organization.
That's fabulous. You are uniquely situated as a member of the founding family and as past board leadership. Will you tell me more about when you were active on the board in 1994
Be
through
happy to.
1995?
Like I said, when I came, the organization was somewhat in a shamble. There were two things that stuck out as I was preparing for this interview with you, Jessica. The first one, when I became president, was in 1994. And so I was for 2 years, 94 and 95. And the first thing right out of the box was trying to get the organization resurrected again. So I contacted the Jewish Federation because I needed to get our treasury back. We had to have money to make the loans. So working with them and a handful of letters and personal meetings or whatever, but anyway, so I was able to get the treasury refunded, and obviously the demise of the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan Philanthropic Fund was no more. So now we had money to be able to operate on. After that, it was, okay, now we've got our money back, what do we do next? So as president, I came to Fred and the board, and Fred, I asked, where are the records? Where are the files? You got to have a business. What have you got here? Well, the offices were at Fred's home. And what he did is he volunteered to let the organization, since they were going out of business, to go ahead and stop, file all the stuff over at his house. So my vice president at that time, Alan Luderman, and myself, we went over there, and we we were kind of taken back, so to say, when Fred showed us boxes of documents going back to the 30s, 40s, and current up to the 90s type. We spent hours constantly going through that. We didn't know who the membership was, basically, other than these few handful of men. We didn't know who had loans and who didn't, basically, who was paying back the loans. A lot of loans, they were just simply forgiven. They just never went after them. Some of them were 30 years old, more years old. So Alan and I, after spending a lot of time going through these records in our spare time, weekends, when we were on, working at our jobs, the next thing that we did, or I did, is approach the board to get us a computer and have some software designed to be able to catalog and also actually resurrect the organization again. It was like pulling teeth with these old men because they were not real savvy to the 20th century and computers at that time, and didn't want us to spend money on computers, because the attitude, which is still prevalent today, which is great, is that that money needs to be loaned out to people that are in need, not buying equipment. But we finally convinced them to give us enough money to buy a computer. Alan arranged to get the software that we needed, and then to program it and to get us up. So now we could make loans, we could try to go out and solicit membership dues and donors and get going. So that was number one. Number two, that probably would come right behind that, was when I took office. That was during the demise of the old Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall had come down in the late 80s, and then 91, Russia started letting immigrants out, and so right in 94 we had quite a few Russian immigrants, even before that, wanting to get out of Russia, Jewish immigrants, and they had come to Dallas. many of them without jobs, or they were being taken help by the Federation and other Jewish agencies. So we were quite busy. But again, that was good because now we could make loans and we could do the things that needed to be done to help these Jewish refugees and the immigrants that were coming over. So those are two things. I mean, there are many during my tenure that on the Hebrew Flown, but two that really stick out in my mind or my memory that I have.
Absolutely. What are some other initiatives or projects that you worked on during your time on the board?
We had, there were so many because at that time, even fast forward, we were basically making general loans. When I say general loans, these were emergency loans. You know, I think in that time we started at right a little under $1,000. I think it was like $750, and then we went to $1,000, and then $1,500. But basically, the refugees and the Jewish people in need here were calling us to, you know, they didn't need a whole lot of money other than maybe a car to get to work, but it was more of being able to pay utility bills, pay the rent. So we had that initiative going, and with that, I, and obviously the other board members, we came up with loan programs that the organization has taken and ran like unbelievably well and had put in more loan programs. But during my tenure, past president, working on the board, probably up until around 2014, when I was coming to board meetings very actively, one of the ones that we established that was terrific, of course, was the higher education loan. That was always the most popular and always great. We then saw a need from there that we wanted to get health care and medical. We were getting a lot of calls for that. Not only equipment, but people that needed help in, again, paying doctor bills, medical bills. Before I left, one of the programs that's instituted was the being able to send our Jewish kids to summer camp, you know, the Green Family Camp at that time. So those are just a few to mention, but that stick out that we worked on.
You described the Jewish, the foundation, the philanthropic foundation at the Jewish Federation. Were you able to reclaim your funds?
Yes.
When you rebuilt your treasury?
Yes. They were, after meeting with them and, like I said, several letters, and they knew the work that we were doing, which dovetailed, obviously, with the federations and what they were doing. So they did give us back our funds to put back in the treasury and be able to make loans.
That's cool. What did you learn during your time with Dallas Hebrew Free Loan that you wish everyone else knew?
I wrote to myself, that was a toughie because, I mean, obviously the feeling you have when you help someone in need and you see what a great delight, you know, maybe delight's the wrong word, but just the empathy, the gratitude that you feel in helping someone, I could understand exactly what my grandfather and those 12 men were up to. I wrote here in notes, because I knew you were going to ask me that question, I said, a marvelous, one-of-a-kind organization that impacts many lives in our Jewish community, and in the process gives these lives in need a hand up, not a hand out. That's always been our motto. A way of retaining dignity when unforeseen economic or health problems enter into someone's life. So that's what I learned, and I hope those coming after me learn. But I'm sure they will if they're ever involved with the Dallas Hebrew Free Loan.
Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to share that we didn't touch upon today?
No, other than to thank you for doing this, the Jewish Historical Society, Dallas Jewish Historical Society. I think it's wonderful that you're keeping this going, tradition. Um, I'm very excited about it, and if there's anything that I can do to help you, Jessica, or your fine organization, please call on me. Thank you again.
We will. Thank you, Marvin.